Hold on. Okay, bear with me, people. Unmute. All right. Now, share screen, PowerPoint, share. There we go. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome if there were people who were not in the first session. This is the second session of Children in COVID-19 Impacts, Interventions, and Supports. And let me just quickly share what I'm thinking the flow of today will be like. I'm going to do a very quick recap of where we were last week. Then the main focus is going to be on children before the age of 5, and beginning with what their typical social and emotional development is and what the challenges are that are posed, which we started to talk about last week with COVID-19. And then the main focus being examples of some of the supportive resources that are available. Hopefully everybody received the resource list that was sent out by Andy, which has much more than we'll be looking at in this session. But first, looking in a general way at strategies to build children's emotional well-being in this context, we'll have a look specifically at some grandparent connections and relationships. And then with the help of Erin Morris, one of the participants in this course, we will have a look at home visiting in the context of the pandemic and adaptations that are being tried in order to further support that very important intervention. And then along the way, we'll have discussion chat. Please use either the chat function or hand raising, some general discussion, and I'll do a quick preview of the next session. So just first of all, if you recall, after some general introductory information about the content and the flow of the class, we looked at some of the ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic is challenging children's development and well-being, but we also spent time in the second part of the session looking at how children typically think about and react to what is happening now, and previewed and gave examples of some practical, concrete tools, whether they're videos for children, books for children, ways that adults can talk to children about the pandemic. And with that, we will be in this session getting very specifically into younger children and their development. What I'd like to do first, and I'm going to, I think, what I want to do, Andy, is switch to gallery view. How do I do that? How do I do that?
Mary Lou, there may be a symbol in your upper left-hand screen, possibly. I'm not sure. Different computers have different ways of showing it.
Okay.
You have to click on share screen to go away from that. I'm not sure.
Oh.
No.
You think? I don't think so.
I thought you did,
I'll
but
try that.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Ta-da! Here we are. Okay.
Yay.
Thank you very much. Okay. What would be really useful, since this is not a gigantic group, and I know that people have a lot of self-discipline, is to ask each of you, and you can just signal with hand raising or just wave your hand, and Karen, you can help me, is to hear briefly from each of the people that is signed in here about a little bit about you, just who you are, where you're from, and specifically your connections to children. Are you a grandparent? Do you now, or have you ever worked with children? What are the connections with children that you have that are uppermost in your mind? But if you could do this in 30 seconds or so, that would be great for a kind of a snapshot of connections with children. So Karen, maybe you can keep an eye for either physical or virtual hand raising. I see Claudia.
Yep, I
And
can do it.
unmute yourself when it's your turn. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
You
I'm
are.
Claudia Schuster. I am a parent of 3, a grandparent of 5, now all teenagers through age 20. I spent my professional life first as a kindergarten and preschool teacher, then in training of a variety of childcare professionals, and eventually at the university level teaching both undergrad and grad students in early childhood education and child development.
Thank you. Good modeling there, Claudia. Who's next?
I'll go. I'm
Okay.
Erin Morris, and I am I work for Child Care of the Berkshires, which is one of the organizations that is very happy to be, a part of this meeting. I myself am not a parent, but I have a degree in early childhood education, and I work very specifically with parents at this point and who have young children below the age of 5 in the program that I run. And I also have a special love of brain development in young children.
Thank you. Next. Let's see, Carol and then Louise. Thank you. Unmute, Carol. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, finally. Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry. Another button. So I'm Carol Siegel, and I'm from Pittsfield. I was, for many, many years, I was in charge of the school adjustment counselors and psychologists in the city of Pittsfield schools. So of course, worked with loads and loads of children at all age levels. And I'm as Claudia was, I'm a mother of 3 adults and a grandmother of 5 grandson children. The only one that's not already an adult is a 16-year-old. And my interest now is that I'm on the board of 18 Degrees, which is formerly Berkshire Center for Families and Children, which I see Erin is nodding, and they have lots of early childhood programs. So
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's see, Louise.
Okay, yes, I am. Okay, I'm Louise Barber, and I am a grandparent. I had 2 daughters, and I'm taking this course because I love children, and I wonder what the long-term effects might be with the way things are now.
Thank you so much. Again, great modeling. Who's next? Robin?
Yes,
And then Judith.
I'm Robin Melton. I live in the Berkshires, although I'm on the faculty of the University of Colorado, where I teach public health students. I'm a lawyer by training, and I've really spent my career working on children and family issues, particularly related to improving systems to serve them. I currently am directing a mental health organization, so I'm very concerned about the impact of COVID on mental health of children.
I'm seeing some resources here that we can draw from. Judith, would you like to go next? Just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Got it. I'm Judy Grossman. I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. My daughter is a preschool teacher in New York City at the Mary Cat School. And I taught school for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I taught 6th grade, 5th grade, and then I went down to preschool. So I'm interested in getting some information to her that she might not otherwise get in her situation now.
That's great. At least if nothing else right now, we have those resources that you can ship right on over.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah, and maybe the
Thank you.
recordings as well. Let's see. Who else? Yes, Lois, please. I think it's Lois.
Yes, I've never taught, but I have a granddaughter who is a senior education major at Smith, and early childhood education. And I'm interested in what she will be needing to do and know, and if there's any way that family can help.
Fabulous. That's great. Let's see. Who else? Yes, Linda, please.
Hi. So I was a school librarian for many, many years before I retired from that and came to the Berkshires. But I have two sons and 4 grandchildren ranging in age from 6 up to 24. And so that's my interest.
Great. Let's see. I see Laura's hand. Yes.
Hi there. I do not have children or then therefore grandchildren. I was, my background was predominantly with preschool special education students. I was a teacher in preschool special ed. I also have background in elementary education, but special education was where I did most of my work. And then I moved into higher ed. I've taught in teacher preparation programs across the country, and I'm right now at Elms College, which is in Chicopee. And so I'm very appreciative of this class. And I'm also teaching a class that begins in March to school nurses in about special education. So I'm very interested in the information you're providing, because I think that's going to be a very good population to talk to.
We have a ton to connect about, I think, like parallel lives. And and
yes,
actually,
Mary Lou, it's wonderful to meet you as early childhood in NYC.
Well, thank you. I mean, when I was at NAYC, I was sort of the main liaison with DEC, and still have a lot of, this is the Professional Association of Early Childhood Special Ed. And anyway, it's very dear to my heart. And next week, I was thinking about this week, but so much to do, so little time. Next week, I want to devote a chunk to implications for children with IEPs and so on. And we'll be looking for some help and input. We need to talk. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, shall we tug right on? This is great. Karen, and then Carlotta. Yes.
Okay, I'll go. I worked with profoundly deaf children from birth up through age 12 for many years. Also did teacher training, research, you name it. Been there, done that. Now I work with a special education surrogate parent program locally. So I'm a surrogate parent working on IEPs and educational programs for 3 children. One little guy, 7 years old, is profoundly autistic, and then 2 girls, one's 12, one's 16, with profound behavior, emotional problems.
Thank you. Let's see, who was next? Carlotta, sorry. And then Charles. Carlotta, yeah.
Hi, I am also a Well, I'm a parent of 2 adult children and I'm a grandparent wannabe. I would love to be a grandparent. Hasn't been in the cards yet, but I am a retired early childhood educator, worked with primarily preschool age children, and then was also on the faculty of several universities in early childhood education. And I'm very, very worried about the children who are growing up in this environment.
Okay. We all have a lot in common there. Charles or Charlie? Yeah.
Hi, I'm a mostly retired optometrist from Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I've had living with my son and his family for the last COVID time. I have a new 1-year-old grandson, my first and only, and we are cohabitating and certainly interested in children. And I think he doesn't, this is all new to him and he's barely walking. Let's see, where are you, Nathan?
I was.
Oh, there he is.
Oh,
There he
good.
is.
That's a child.
That's who we're living with. And we were also interested in, how it's going to affect children and in general, how it's affecting life.
Yep. All right. I haven't been keeping track, but wave your hand if you would like to share and haven't had a chance yet. Yes, Terry and Brian.
Wait a minute.
Terry, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, my name is Terry Weaver. I am a 23-year-ago retired primary care internist. In my training, I took a rotating internship and had 2 months of pediatrics. I love kids and thought about going into it, but emotionally, I couldn't handle the pediatric oncology, the childhood leukemics and stuff. This was like 60 years ago. And also, I love the kids, but I wasn't so sure about the parents all the time. And I have 5 kids and 8 grandchildren between 2 and 11. Busy bunch.
Thanks, Terry. Brian.
Sure.
Okay, I am Brian Harrison from Pittsfield, and I have 2 grown sons, one of which has a 7-year-old daughter, which is my only grandchild. She just learned to crawl this week. And so that's, probably some of my primary interests. Plus I did work for an organization called Clinical and Support Options, which is like the Breen Center, and worked with families and children in mental health and behavioral health.
Let's see. Speak now if.
Laura has her hand up. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Laura. Laura.
I had already spoke. I'm sorry.
You already, yes, right.
Yeah, I should put my hand down. Sorry about that.
So, anyone else? If not, you can certainly chat or jump in later. And what I'm going to do is first give a big thank you for your contributions. Really, I've been taking a lot of notes and am glad that people are not only interested, but have such rich resources, personal and professional resources to share. So with that, let me go on. There we go. Okay. Now that I've shared the screen, I'm going to leave it for a minute because I have a short video, not as many videos as last time, but this is actually something from PBS Parents, and it's a very short presentation by 2 early development, sort of clinical developmental professionals talking about children's emotional development and well-being, especially children in the first 4 or 5 years of life. So let's just have a quick look at that. I'm going to stop this share. I always have to talk to myself with this. Let's see, now I'll share the screen. And where is that? It's not that one. Let me go to this and see if this will work. Let's see if this opens it. Yes. Can you see that screen?
No,
No,
no.
You cannot.
the link didn't open.
Okay. I really would like to. Okay, let me stop sharing. And I'm very puzzled about why it didn't, but let me try something different.
Mary Lou, were you sharing the desktop or were you just sharing Word? Do you know?
I was trying to share the desktop, and I thought that I had put this on my screen, but I am not.
Try clicking on the link.
Oh, wait a minute, I see it now. I see it now. It disappeared and then it appeared now. Come on. Now do you see something?
Yes.
Well, then, uncooperative.
Do you have the audio box checked?
Oh, okay. I screwed it up again. I know. Okay.
It should be on the bottom.
Are and to sort of deal with them or work through them in the way that we need to in order to live productively in whatever society or place we live in. And then the social piece really, again, is about relationship. And so when you put those together, we really need to understand our emotions, and we do that and understand that through a relationship. And so as infants, it really is that first relationship with our primary caregiver, usually our parent, or there's a variety of different caregivers it could be. That parent helps us to understand what we're going through, understand what our bodies are experiencing, and they help us to organize our bodies and help us to understand our emotions.
For social emotional health, we want to make sure that children can recognize their feelings, recognize other people's feelings. So we make sure we talk to children in words that are just like, you seem angry, you seem tired, tell me how you feel, how do you think I feel? We also want to make sure they have consistency and routine in their life, because that lays such a comfortable world. When they know routines around bedtime, when they know routines around dinner time, when they know what's going to happen in their life, they can relax and learn.
Well, I think that we have to, as parents, parents have to provide ongoing, nurturing relationships that are responsive. They have to have an understanding of their baby and what their baby's needs are. They have to understand sort of developmentally, so have some idea of development and be able to respond positively to that, ongoing sort of nurturing relationships with their infants. They have to be able to provide consistency and predictability, and those two things really help an infant to feel safe and to know that if I have a need, if I cry, if I have a my belly that doesn't feel right, and I cry, which is how I communicate because I'm an infant, I know that someone will come, that my parent will come. They'll take care of me. They'll make that bad feeling go away, and then I'll be able to feel better. And as children grow up, they sort of take that feeling with them, so that they know that if I cry, which is I have a and I let someone know that I have that need, then I know that I'm worthy enough for someone to respond to my need and to help me, and then I'm going to feel better, and I'm going to be able to negotiate that need. And as they get bigger and bigger, when we are asking them to go to school, without that parent, they can carry that understanding with them and have the understanding that here's my teacher. I know my parent's not here, but I also know that I can trust that adults will help me when I need something. And so they can have that, they have that understanding that someone will help me if I have that need.
Social emotional health.
Stop. Okay.
You're breaking up quite a bit, Raylu.
In the video?
Sound really, at least for me. Maybe it's my.
Yeah, that, it may be, I don't know, it may be a sort of bandwidth issue. I'll see between now and next week what I may be able to do about it. I tried to eliminate it, as many other things.
Well, I'm limping on my old laptop, so it could be me.
So it could be. Okay. So I thought, I think this is a nice basic set of insights about typical very early emotional development and how that affects later development. Just a few takeaways that I had from what they had to say. You can't learn unless you're secure. I think that underscores, as very many of you know professionally and everybody from experience, that those connections between emotional development, which I did a lot of my own research on, and learning is very, very close. And also, key message, we understand emotions through relationships. And it's that theme in current research as well as a long chain of theory and earlier research that relationships really are the foundation of development. And another quote, when they know what's going to happen in their life, they can relax and learn. What I started thinking about was, I kind of pulled together sort of the general understanding of what the path of positive social and emotional development is in the first 4 or 5 years of life. And as a number of you were saying earlier, when we think about the impact of the pandemic and what is happening for children and families, we have to ask ourselves what the challenges are to children's social and emotional development when you look at sort of the progress developmentally about things like caring about friends, when friendships are difficult to maintain for young children, when there are real challenges to children's emotional regulation. Does this make it more difficult for children to manage their emotions, especially if their parents are experiencing a lot of stress and emotional uncertainty? The last bullet, able to play with others, deal with conflicts and cooperate. A lot of, as those of you especially who've been preschool teachers and involved in early education know, that those kinds of social interactions are extremely important. Fortunately, and this is just a parenthetical comment, one of the things that I put on the resource list that Andy sent out is something from a really good group that pulls together in a practical way research. They're based in Australia. It's called The Conversation. And they pull together a reminder, and this will segue into something else, that children, thankfully, they're not invulnerable, but they're pretty darn resilient. And we see that in many different ways. And of course, many parents, teachers, and others are concerned and are eager for schools and programs to safely reopen, in part because in early childhood especially, social interaction, social development, social competence is so important. But they remind us that relationships with adults to a great extent are the foundation of social competence, and that for many children, the opportunity to spend more time with adults within the family may not compensate for, but may strengthen that foundation. Anyway, those are just a few thoughts about kind of the trade-offs and kind of a reassurance that all is not lost. And there's it used to be, and I think Erin mentioned her interest in brain development, and I, although I'm not an expert, have interest in it too. But there was a quite influential and well-founded book about sort of some of the myths of brain development. And it is not true that it's all over in the first X months of life, right? There's a lot of plasticity, resilience, strength, and people who study adolescent development are struck by the malleability and of many aspects of brain development in adolescence and youth. So again, as a parenthesis, that we do not need to worry that there is some window that will slam shut, which is not to say that we should be uncaring and unattentive to what is happening in development in the early years and what the influence of the pandemic may be. So with that, and this is sort of a segue to hopeful notes, there are, as the resources that I sent out underscored, there are a ton of general and specific resources that illustrate strategies to promote children's, in the first 4 or 5 years of life, their emotional competence, their social competence, and so on. Child trends, and I have another short video, but since I screwed that last one up, and this is just somebody saying the same thing, let me just summarize for you some of what child trends, some of it, let me just describe what child trends is. Some of you know that organization based in Washington, D.C., may have mentioned last week, but it's a nonprofit that has a fabulous staff of researchers who focus on, as it sounds, issues affecting children, families, and policies related to children and families. And they have done, with respect to our focus, some terrific literature reviews and summaries, many of which are on the resources, the general as well as specific resources that I've sent. And I have some friends who are at Child Trends, and they're like the smartest people that you could imagine, and so terrific. One of the best resources, and it is on your list, is related to stress, risk, and protective factors. And what does the research say about what kind of factors are known in all kinds of stressful crisis situations to protect or buffer people, children, adults, against the effects of adversity. And we talked about that a little bit last week. You know, again, it's not like there's magic bullets that will protect everybody. And this is not to dismiss the effects of stress, conflict, vulnerability, but it is to say that there is a ton of research going back years on what are called protective factors, on the concepts of resilience. And what Child Trends has done in a brief is to provide just an excellent summary of 5 evidence-based protective factors and their relevance in the context of COVID-19. And depending on your interests, some of what's written about there is specific to parents and caregivers and what they can do, but then also, because they're also a very policy-oriented organization, they also talk about what, how do they put it, communities, states, tribes, and territories can do. So what are some of the policy, and I would put that locally as well, for those of you who are locally involved. But just, you know, briefly with the time that we have, the first one, sensitive responsive caregiving, is a huge protective factor for children who are experiencing or recovering from traumatic, adverse circumstances. Having a sensitive, responsive adult, and often that's a parent, it may be the lady down the hall in the next apartment, it may be a childcare provider, a home visitor, but we know from research that having that responsive adult makes a great deal of difference. Somebody to spend quality time with children, staying connected. This sort of goes into thinking about grandparents, even when physical separation is necessary, Child Trends points out, but staying connected is tremendously important. And so that keeping in mind and finding ways, even in this context, to make sure that children have that sensitive, responsive caregiving. The next one is sort of, you know, if you studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs and so on in psychology, meeting the basic needs of children and families. This is everything from food security, housing security, protecting children's well-being in all sorts of ways. And this really goes more toward what parents and caregivers can do, and helping families, and maybe Erin will talk about that a little bit more later, but helping families to see that asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, whether it's asking for help from a neighbor, from the person who lives next door, or from a social service agency, and so on, and being helped to identify helpful local services. The next one I really like as well, because again, emotional development is something that's been close to my heart personally and professionally, and I've written about that and so on. But Child Trends identifies what they call the 3 R's, which kind of makes it a easy to remember mnemonic, if I can remember them. Yes, okay, reassurance, and this is in the brief that you have. Reassurance, and two other things. I have it. Routines, that's right. Reassurance, routines, you know, predictable routines for young children, which we know anyway is really important, right? It's part of what we know circumstances that children thrive under, whether they're typically developing children, or I'm thinking about our earlier conversation children who have disabilities or other kinds of special needs, having predictable schedules. And of course, this is so hard because there's so much uncertainty now, but that reassurance, routines, and regulation, helping children feel regulated, feel under control, feeling like they are in control and can have control of small things. You know, we adults too, right? I like those recipes where I can follow everything step by step. That's really good. So, you know, those are some of the areas that they talk about with respect to emotional support and support for caregiver well-being, which we're going to focus on, especially in the last session of this course, really turning to looking at the adults, whether they're parents, teachers, other caregivers, and what are some resources that have been developed to help in that area. Because we know that if the caregivers aren't taking care of themselves, then they're not able to care for children, and dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, taking time for self-care, whatever way that may be. And then, and this is sort of a segue into a brief look, at least at grandparents, is social connectedness. This is a protective factor in any stressful circumstance, to the extent that the people, whether they're children or adults, who are experiencing stress, trauma, difficult circumstances, to the extent that they have connections, virtual or real, with other people, that is a source of strength, or a so-called protective factor that buffers or cushions, gives a cushion against the worst, the most harmful effects of stress. So you know, that gets into extended family, focusing on not connecting. They're not talking about connections with anybody on the internet, any random site that people go to, but focusing on the most meaningful and personal connections and trying to make those happen for children and within families. So I am actually going to just kind of, no pun intended, zoom forward, because I want to make sure that we have time to share some of your thoughts about grandparents' roles, and then to transition to looking at home visiting as a potentially powerful source of support for children and families, both with respect to social and emotional development and in other respects. So this really connects with connection, right? Keeping connected while far away. And I simply want to say that there are many online resources available. I haven't listed them all in the resources, but there are tips, especially related to video calls and so on. But I think what I would like to do is to kind of take a little pause and see if some of you would want to share as grandparents some of the things that you may be doing to keep connected. Some people have a 1-year-old running around the house, and that's a great way to stay connected. But if you do not, what are you doing? Some of you have very young children, grandchildren, some of you college age, but especially with the younger children, what are some things that you could suggest from your experience that others might benefit from? You can wave or unmute yourself, or you can chat. Brian?
Well, my son regularly sends by internet the videos of my grandchildren, and so that's what I was talking about. The first crawling and different things that she's doing. So that helps me keep connected.
That's great. Yeah. And then do you have a chance to send anything back the other way, or?
I send responses. He's out in Boston, so it's just, with the pandemic, I was going to see her once a month until October, and then not since, except for very briefly at Christmas.
Yeah. Thanks. Linda, were you going to share something? Yes, Linda, and then Claudia. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I do something with my 9 and 6-year-old grandchildren who are brothers almost every night. And I probably get more out of it than they do. But I read their bedtime stories every night to them. And I've found that what's really effective is that we're into a series of books that are, every night we end with a cliffhanger. So that primes them for continuing.
Yeah, may I ask how operationally, how do you do that? Do you have the book and they have the book, or you're showing it on a screen, or what?
We started in the beginning when the libraries were, you couldn't get a hardcover book. I was downloading ebooks to my tablet, and then we set up a Google Meet so we can see each other, and I hold the tablet in one hand that I can read from on my, that I can read from, but we look at each other through the laptop. And then once the library's opened, so sometimes I still do ebooks, and sometimes I still, now we're able to actually get real books from the library. So I'm able to do it either way.
That's great. Let me go to Claudia and then to Laura.
Because I think many of us have older grandchildren, I'm just reporting on two good friends of mine. Right from birth, they got on the Zoom or whatever they wanted to use with their grandchild and child, so that they see each other every day, often multiple times. They talk to each other. First, the baby's in an infancy, just looking as grandma is talking on, and then the baby starts to respond. And it's amazing to me that just in the 2 dimensions, but with consistency and love, they have developed relationships. The baby, as he's developed speech, is now calling her Nana, and you just see the relationship developing right on the screen. It's amazing.
Let me just jump in with 2 comments about that, both kind of prompted by something that I was reading that reminds one, again, if you've studied child development, that even very young infants, when you just show them a face, or a face like a drawing of eyes and a mouth, they are more attracted to that. It's a sort of evolutionary kind of thing. They're more attracted to that than any scrambled face, any different configuration. So there is a pull to that, even 2-dimensionally. The other thing that I just wanted to comment on, it connects with what both folks were saying, is again, some of the recommendations that have been made by other experienced grandparents is, the awkwardness of like a formal Zoom call. You don't need to do it like that. It's like you're there on your screen, and the more that with younger children, especially, that it can just be part of, something in the daily routine that whether it's a bath time or something that they ordinarily do, or for some somewhat older children, they're practicing a musical instrument, but they do things that they do every day. Anyway, I just want to interject that. Let's see. Laura, please.
Yes, and maybe someone has some suggestions for this. Through my Unitarian Society, the director put older folks with the young children in our society. And so I'm working with a 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old. And I started this in May. I think his mom, he's a very bright little guy, has some attention difficulties, has lots of great thoughts, but putting everything down in writing can be a challenge for him. I think his mom, knowing with the pandemic, was looking for any, extra support, that he could do to work on his story. So that's what we do. We meet once a week. I just share the screen. I have a Word document. He dictates his thoughts to me, and I type them up so he can see them. Sometimes I suggest a word, you know, so, and he's gotten really, I can just see the growth in him. He's got a very good narrative sense, but he's just, you know, improved tremendously. So I know there are speech to text devices, but this is just what we're doing. He just tells me, and you know, I write away.
I could see that with, you know, grandparent, grandchild in a different context. Laura was asking if anybody has any other ideas about that kind of thing. Would anybody like to build on that or have something else to share? Carrie, was that a hand?
Yeah, there's not really, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but not
Yes.
really building on that, but just a somewhat personal aside. I had mentioned on the introduction, if you will, that I had been a primary care physician with a bunch of grandchildren and love kids and all that can't handle pediatric oncology. But some years back, our oldest grandson, who lives in Virginia, my daughter called, we were in San Francisco for another set of grandchildren, and he had a stage 3 T-cell lymphoblastoma. And that was a pretty rough time. He's older now and in remission and hopefully cured. We don't really know. But I'm interested to know what he's apt to be thinking about him having gone through that and the fact that he's had cancer. I myself find I can't really talk to him about it, but I think, I mean, he's aware of it. And they're in, you know, they have some great support groups amongst parents of oncologic kids. But you know, he's aware, and I guess once in a while he'll talk about it. But I'm not quite sure whether to ever initiate talking to him about it myself or not. Curious about what you think there.
Yeah, others might have thoughts about that. I don't with respect to that specific issue, but from a little bit of some experience over the years with one of our sons who had kind of a recurring situation, but also just generally talking with kids, it's sort of the principle that you can't have just one conversation and that there's no harm in a low-key way bringing things up at different times and points because sometimes there's a readiness either developmentally or personally, and then there isn't at another time. I think some of the general suggestions for talking to children about the pandemic have applicability with children who have chronic illnesses and so on. And there is research, there's a literature on that, and I might be able to pull a few things together, Terry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm looking around for I see people nodding, but I'm not sure we're wanting to. There, I wanted to, while you're thinking, I had something else I was going to pull out here about. Oh, okay. Few other thoughts from some resources, some of which have already been mentioned, but you talked about routine tasks. Some grandparents, this may depend on your field, but have helped with homework or, you know, have been like a tutor on something that where the grandparent actually may have more. No, this is especially with somewhat older children. People talk about things like sharing one's own knowledge, great grandparents' cookie recipe and making it or making a snack where, you know, grandparents making a snack, grandchild's making the same snack and eating together. And as a reminder, especially with slightly older grandchildren, letting the grandchild teach the grandparent something like a cool online game that they would have no idea how to play unless the grandchild, it's like, I can teach you something, is a good idea. You know, I think and then of course there's snail mail, right? But I think a theme in a lot of what I've been reading and thinking about is not giving up. There was a survey that I read from Australia of grandparents and video calls, and some of them loved it and had great experiences, as you all were describing. Some, flip side, said it's really awkward. I did it once and it just, the grandchild wasn't really interested. I didn't know what to say. And I think a theme, though, is not giving up on the technology, because the technology is potentially really useful, as some of your examples and some of the other examples that I'm sharing show. It's just like next week, I want to talk more about digital media and young children. It's a tool. And it's a tool that can be used for good, developmentally, educationally, or it can be a tool that's nothing more than a boring electronic workbook. And it's all in how you use it. But it's when people who live closer have done, drive-bys, standing in the driveway and all kinds of things that are not necessarily digital, but give, teachers have done the same thing, that give those kinds of warm, personal connections. There, I maybe want to kind of wrap up for now, at least. And please chat if you have other examples of things that you've done as a grandparent to stay connected. But I ran across, not in time to put it in the resources, but it was a special issue of a journal that I'm not familiar with. It's called the Journal of Contemporary Society. I think that's right. Can't read my own writing here. Anyway, in pulling together research about grandparents and grandparent involvement, and I can't vouch for the quality of the research, I was just reading a summary of it, but there is a good bit of evidence that involvement of grandparents, this wasn't pandemic related, 2018, but associations with improved mental health among grandchildren. I think, I would speculate that that links to the resilience protective factors kind of research. In other words, this is one more person in that child's life. And in particular, if this is a child or a family that's really having some challenging times, the grandparent may be, whether physically present or not, a real source of affirmation, of emotional support. If we have time, and maybe in another session, I think many of us, not all, but have wonderful memories of our own grandparents and a relationship with a particular grandparent that was just a gem of a relationship, especially maybe at a particular time in one's life. So the studies also showed improved resilience. So again, it's all of that literature about psychological stress, trauma, coping, resilience. Grandparent involvement really boosts resilience. And interestingly, there was some evidence of greater pro-social behavior, which means the shorthand that we have is caring, sharing, and helping, which, certainly children tend to develop those pro-social behaviors as they get older, but it's not like magic, if they grow up in a family, community, school environment that emphasizes those characteristics and culturally emphasizes those characteristics, then they're likely to develop them. And grandparents, it seems, help to contribute. And it may be because, of course, at points in grandparents' lives, as children get older, they see that grandparents need help, just as grandparents are sources of help. So great potential for grandparent support, and a lot of ways we've just scratched the surface to see what those are. So I'm going to make a little transition here and go back to why is that there? I'm being very awkward right now. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. I just shared the wrong part. So from grandparents, if this will advance, please do. There we go. To home visiting. And this is just an intro to our very generous participant, Erin Morris. Why home visiting? I wanted to, it applies to children's development, not only emotionally, but their early learning and so on. But this seems like a good place to focus on this form of support for children and families. Home visiting has been around. Some of you are very familiar with it, some not so much. This is a little infographic that the organization 0 to 3 had developed, and so it just kind of does a quickie, what is it? And it has always been a way to support parents and to support the development of their children. And ironically, in the pandemic, see, the infographic says, a knock on the front door can bring parents the support they need. Well, not so much, but this is the philosophy behind it. Reaching families where they live, delivering parent support. What you see in the infographic in the little windows, kind of at the center there, is providing through home visiting information on their child's development and early learning. Also social support. Also, where it seems needed, developmental screenings. How's the child's development going informally, and maybe with, if you look at the window below that, referrals to community services. Is there a need for a closer look at this child's development or functioning in different ways? Are there, for families that are having economic or other difficulties, the home visitor may help parents make connections to benefits to which they are entitled and which they might not be aware of. Anyway, home visiting is a multi-pronged intervention which has robust research around its effectiveness when well implemented. It's so important. Head Start has home visiting programs and so on. There are national umbrellas as well as regional home visiting programs. And the big challenge is now that access to those services, the door in a way has slammed in the face of home visiting, but as Erin will tell us, it has not, right? So what I'm going to do then is, let's see, Erin, how are we going to do this? Should I stop sharing and then you share, I think?
Yeah. So if you wanted to do that while you're doing that, I will say hello, everyone, and thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you about one of my, huge passions, which is home visiting. Mary Lou, you did a lovely job of describing that, and that infographic is perfect. And I would say that yes, in a perfect world, our programs, home visiting programs, we're knocking at the door and, sometimes hollering in, can I come in, in apartment buildings type situation. But a little bit about myself quickly is I work for Child Care of the Berkshires, which is a family support and childcare organization located, their headquarters is located in North Adams, but we have programming throughout Berkshire County. We have childcare centers in North County and Central County, and then we also have home visiting programs, family childcare. We have a wonderful family center up in North Adams that provides amazing support for families, and it's never been more important than it is right now. The home visiting program that I specifically run is called the Parent Child Plus program. It used to be called Parent Child Home program. That some people might be familiar with that. If you're associated with the Pittsfield Public Schools at all, they had the program for many, many, many years, and it was called the Title I program, is what a lot of people refer to it as, was the Title I home visiting program. But this program is very specifically supports families with young children, usually about 18 months to 2 years, and they spend 2 years in the program getting books and toys. We provide each family with books and toys that help get them ready for school. It's a school readiness program. It's literacy based, it's evidence based. It began by a woman named Phyllis Levenstein in the 60s. She's Yes, yep. She is from New York City, and she was recognizing that there were a lot of kids that were starting school with very little resources, and she started doing her doctorate in that work, and she created what was then called the Mother and Baby program. We've obviously come a long way, and there's been different iterations of it, but the program has a lot of it has remained the same, and it's the idea that the dosage of the visits is what's really, really important. And so our visits take place in homes. Pre-COVID, took place in homes twice a week for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, because when you're working with 2-year-olds, 30 minutes is about your max that you're going to get anything out of them. Sometimes even 30 minutes is a stretch. But it's also the idea that we are providing some of that support to the parent as well. So, the way that I would always talk to my staff about it is think of splitting your time. Think of splitting your time between doing, 15 minutes or so with the parent and 15 minutes with a child. And that's a lot of times what they would do. And each week, the family's getting a new book or a new toy, and then lots of wonderful activities and ideas on things they can do with that book and toy. We're reading, we're modeling good behaviors and, how parents can talk to their children. We work very specifically with, we take our highest needs families first. So as you can imagine, we work with families that maybe didn't have the best experience in school and don't know that their job as their child's first teacher is one of those important jobs. And so we like to think that we give them the skills to help build those, that idea that they are their child's first teacher. So it's something that I love home visiting. And when COVID-19 happened in March, which is almost a year now, and that still seems very crazy, we thought we would just be, going home for 2 weeks. And so we thought, okay, we'll be back, and we'll do a couple things. We'll drop some books and toys off to our families. We'll just stay in touch with them for 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens. And once 2 weeks was done and we realized we were in it for the long haul, we really had to make a lot of changes because, as you can imagine, we've been going into these homes twice a week from September until March. These families are really used to us being there. And the moment that support was gone, there was a lot of families that were very stressed about what are they going to do with their kids? Schools were suddenly closed. People were out of work. There was a lot happening. And so I'm going to share my screen because I have some pictures for you guys about the things that we did and the impact that we had it was just as powerful, but just in a very different way. And so one of the first things, let's see, can you all see that okay? Thumbs up, yep, you can see all right, so this is an infographic about the Parent Child Plus program, and it is just a little bit of information. Parent Child Plus graduates are 50% more likely to be prepared for kindergarten than their peers. They score 2.5 times higher on their social emotional skills, and we have a couple of different assessments to kind of look at that. Kids from the program perform 10 months above their chronological age, and they're 30% higher graduation rates overall. And the really wonderful thing about our site in Pittsfield is that a lot of this data because the Pittsfield Public Schools program has been going on for so long, a lot of their data comes directly from the Pittsfield Public Schools and all of the work that they did. So I just think that's always a nice plug for it.
Excuse me, Erin, can you enlarge it? Unless I'm the only one, we're just seeing.
Yeah. We're seeing little boxes.
Oh, that's interesting. It says my screen sharing is paused. Let's see here. Hold on one second. Resume share.
Click on it, maybe it'll enlarge it.
Yeah. We're viewing the whole screen, but do you need to click on that one and then say,
You know what? It keeps saying that my screen sharing is paused, and I am not quite sure why that's happening. Did you take your screen sharing off?
me?
Yeah, by
I
chance.
did. Yeah. And that was when I got, you know.
Is that better?
That's it.
Yes.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
Awesome. We got it. All right. So these are some examples of things that we did with our families. As you can see here, this was a little greenhouse activity. This is actually a picture. Oh, they're going very fast. This is a picture of how the program looks right now. It's very different. But as you can see here, there's a little girl reading the book, and then her home visitor is in the screen on the other side, and she is with her son, actually, who is home from kindergarten, and they're going over some of the different things together while the little girl is watching.
Ooh.
Here's some painting happening, the snowy day. It's been very popular, as you can imagine, because we've had so much snow. This is a folder game for anybody that ever worked with early childhood ed or teachers. We've got these wonderful folder games that we're putting together.
So do you, can I interrupt and ask a question?
Absolutely.
So with these physical materials, how is that working now?
Yeah. So the way that we're doing it with these physical materials is the home visitors are still dropping off. So while the door has essentially closed on the visiting in the home, we're still providing all of these materials.
You're knocking on the door going, ta-da, here you go.
Yeah, it's, you know, different families are asking and kind of requesting to do it in different ways. We have some families that have no problem coming out masked up and you know, having a conversation with the home visitors. We also have some families that would just prefer to get the stuff dropped off on the front porch or, you know, the back porch or wherever, and then they'll just, you know, be done. So very contactless. The home visitors are doing really, really wonderful, inventive things. And this is kind of across the board for a lot of our other home visiting programs as well. We have a Healthy Families program within our agency as well that works specifically with young.
Claudia knows that well.
Yeah, I know there's a Claudia, right? Yes, that has some experience. Yeah, there she is. And so they're working very specifically with young first-time parents, and they work with their kids and parents from birth to 3. So we have a little bit of overlap with our programs. It's really lovely. We oftentimes get families from their program after they've kind of graduated from Healthy Families. And so we're doing a lot of things the same. It's really engaging the parents right now is one of the things that's really, really important. So we are dropping off these books and toys and activities. I have home visitors that are making videos of themselves reading the books, and then they're sending those to their families. Yeah. And it's funny. It's an experience that I don't think any of them ever thought that they would have. But one family is watching the home visitor, the video on their big screen TV. And so the home visitor says, great, now I'm on somebody's big screen TV somewhere in Pittsfield. So that's been just a very interesting thing. And then we've also been doing Zoom like we're doing right now, setting that up with families. And we even have some grandparents. I loved when you were talking about the grandparents earlier. We do have some grandparents that are participating in the program, because while school is not in session, there are still parents that are working, and so they need to find childcare in some way. And you know, so we've always had a very strong grandparent presence in our program, and we love that. We love working with our grandparents. Many of them we refer to just as Nana or Papa, and that is their name, and that will be their name for the whole 2 years of the program, and we just love that. Some things that have really changed, obviously, is the needs are growing for our families. We've always provided a lot of support for our families, whether that be, you know, through early intervention, or here in Pittsfield, we call it the Pediatric Development Center. We've always had really good partnerships with referring families to Head Start and other childcare programs. We really, really pride ourselves on that, but the needs have gotten a lot bigger. Just today, I had a home visitor that went and picked up boxes of food from BCAC to drop those off to families, because as I'm sure you've heard, food insecurity has always been present in the Berkshires, but it really has hit hard with COVID-19. And so we, Berkshire Community Action Council, BCAC, has given our agency 10 boxes of food for families in Pittsfield, and we are coordinating delivering those boxes. And as you had said earlier, Mary Lou, some families don't realize how to ask for help. Some families don't know where to go to ask for help. And some families don't always know that they maybe need the help. And the beautiful thing about home visiting is that somebody is in that home with them or reaching out to them on a regular basis. So if anything happens with a lot of our families, the home visitor is the first one to know about it because she has such a presence in that family and in that home. And so she may not know how to ask anybody else where she could get food, but she knows that she could ask her home visitor where she could get food. And so that, I think, has made our role as visitors and in the community even stronger than it was before. And we are taking it very seriously. This summer, we received money from the Berkshire Taconic and Berkshire United Way to help with food insecurity. And we were able to give every single family in our agency $150 gift card to a grocery store of their choice. And logistically, it was crazy to do that. It was a lot of work, but it was a labor of love. And I'm sure you can only imagine how many families were just, calling us and saying, thank you so much. We had some families that did use it for food, and we had some families who used it for other things. I had a mom who went to Target and bought a bunch of Play-Doh and a bunch of activities because she has a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and she was working from home. And she's like, I just need them to be able to do things. And she didn't have time to make Play-Doh. And so she went to Target, and that was what she used some of her money for. And so needs are very different right now, but, having a small child at home and needing to do some other things while that small child is at home has been tough for some families. And so we've really tried to give them lots of great ideas and activities and things that they can do while they're trapped inside right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that while we have a smaller group of families this year than we've ever had in our program, the families that we do have are feeling really supported, and we are making really great connections with them. We are right now, one of our family engagement activities is we are creating Valentines for some of the local senior centers. We have a family that works with it goes to one of our childcare centers, and the father works at Hillcrest Commons. And we reached out to him and said, hey, could we make some Valentines and, send them over? And he loved the idea. So we're doing that. We're also sending some to the Dalton CRA, and they're going to put them out when they take Meals on Wheels out for shut-ins and seniors. So, we really pride ourselves on that intergenerational support with parents and children. And now we're taking it even a step farther, and working with a population of Pittsfield that has been heavily impacted by COVID. And so we just want to show our support that way as well. So that's a little bit about what we're doing right now. And I would love it if anybody has questions or comments about the work that we're doing. I would gladly answer anything or share any other ideas and things that we're doing.
Yeah, please. We have time for that. So raise your hand or just jump in. Claudia first.
Oh, you're muted, Claudia. That's all right.
And I was wondering what it's like to begin with a family when you've had no contact. Here's the virus. So essentially your contact is going to be on the screen. How do you develop that rapport? That's so much easier to do, I think, in person, especially with the young parents.
I would agree with you, Claudia. It was something at the very beginning that we were really, really struggling with. We started up the program. Usually we start at the beginning or middle of September. We started a little later in September, but we were able to do some in-person visits in the very beginning. And so that was when we started, we were able to do some visits with our new families. It was a lot easier with our families that have been returning because, as I said before, it's a 2-year program. So we have some kids, they've started in program 1, they've gone over to program 2. But for those families that started after October, when the numbers really went up and we were forced to be inside, text messaging is the first way that we sort of start in that, kind of back and forth or on the phone. A lot of my staff have been sending videos first so that the families can really see the home visitor and kind of get an idea that this is going to be the person on the screen when we get in. It's a lot more of building that rapport with the parent first, and then the child usually kind of comes over to the screen and wants to participate. It's definitely been a struggle, and I would say that if my staff were sitting here with me, they would tell you that that is the hardest part right now, is making those connections. But what we're finding is that the families are really looking for connections right now. They want it, they're looking for it. And so the moment that home visitor calls, I mean, before sometimes we would have to call for days and days and weeks trying to get a hold of families. That's not happening anymore. The moment they are getting a call from the home visitor, they are in and they are ready to go. And they just,
like it's a human being, right?
Yes, it's a human being. I mean,
it's a girlfriend or yeah.
Exactly.
Right?
We just keep saying everyone's wells are really dried up right now, and none more than parents. And they are, and all of my home visitors are parents as well. And some of them have small children at home, and they will be the first ones to say, like, I am tapped out, of what we can do. So, but that's a great question, Claudia, and something that we are, continually trying to work with. We had one home visitor that they sent pictures back and forth to each other because the mom wasn't super comfortable starting off virtually. I don't know that her home situation was the best at the time when we first started. And so she was a little bit worried about doing the virtual programming. So they took pictures, like her and the little girl took pictures together, and then they, sent them back and forth to each other. So that was another way just to be able to see that person. But I think the other thing is a lot of the kids are now familiar with this type of programming, like virtually doing the FaceTimes and Zooms. And so just to have another person on the other screen has been kind of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, Carol.
Well, it's not a question, just a comment. Erin, I'm thrilled to see you on the screen and to hear about it, because in my 38 years in the Pittsfield schools, I think one of the most successful programs we ever had was Title I.
Yay!
Phyllis Levenstein speak in early years, and actually got to know her daughter, believe it or not, right now.
Oh, wow.
They're part of her life. But and you're right, the evidence was marvelous, but I'm excited to hear that all the evidence you're using now is local evidence. I mean, that program worked. I got so upset when they cut back Title I so much. I said, that's fine. So it's thrilling to me. I didn't even know it was here now.
Yes. So when the Pittsfield Public Schools had the program, it started off as Title I. It's always been about the same. But as funding cuts started happening, of course, they're cutting in so many.
Title I was the money from the federal government to pay for it.
Exactly. And so there were so many cuts happening, but Child Care of the Berkshires had the program in North County, and they had it for about the same amount of time. And so when at the time, oh gosh, I cannot think of his name. The superintendent who just left.
Dr. McCandless, Jason.
McCandless, yes, thank you. In my head, I was thinking of Joe Curtis because that's who I work with. But Mr. McCandless, when he left, when he was there, he said, listen, there's another program here in Pittsfield, in the area doing this program. Why don't we partner with them? And so our funding, we have different funding sources, but one of our funding sources is the same as it was through the public schools, but it's going through the public schools and filtered over to us at Child Care of the Berkshires. And so I have that funding to run the program. I have funding through Berkshire United Way, longtime partners. If anybody is here that works with Berkshire United Way or is on the board or anything, thank you so much for all that you do for our community, because we love you. And then also we have a small amount of money from Berkshire Taconic Foundation. And that money we are allowed to serve just the families in the Central Berkshire Regional School District. So that is the Dalton, Hinsdale, Peru. So we only have 10 families there, but finding 10 families in that area is almost harder than finding 40 in Pittsfield because of the spread out.
You have 40 families in Pittsfield?
Yes, 40 families in Pittsfield. Well, that's what we're contracted for. We don't have that at this point in time, but over the past 5 years that we've had that funding, we have had 50 families, 40.
What about North Adams?
North Adams, they are contracted for 65 families, but that also includes North Adams, Adams, Cheshire, Lanesboro. They serve kind of a bigger sort of area up there as well. So, and then Healthy Families, which is our other home visiting program, they are all throughout Berkshire County. So they could have families down in Ashley Falls and all the way up in Monroe. So they cover the entire county, and the work that they do is just they're far and above us in a lot of what they do, and they're just amazing as well.
Well, thanks to Claudia, we had sent out notices through her. She sent them to all the school systems, hoping that some people would come from early childhood schools. But anyway, I'm thrilled to hear about this.
Thank
It's
you.
great.
Oh, that makes my heart so happy. Thank you.
It is really, really terrific. Probably going to have to wrap up this little piece in the interest of time. If I can say, Erin, if people have follow-up questions for you, they could put them in the chat or email them to me and I can forward them. And if there are additional resources that you think, I mean, now that we know more about all of the people, the different channels of involvement and so on, if there's something that you think would be good to put out to this group as a resource, again, send it to me and I'd be happy to include it. I should mention that one of the home visiting resources that is in the resource list has, for those who really want to drill down into this area, has, my gosh, I think, I don't have it right in front of me, it may be another child trends thing, I'm not so sure about that, but it reviews the kinds of adaptations that have been made in state after state after state, not always at the state level, the kinds of creative adaptations that have been made to home visiting programs. And so if you or others are interested in that area of support during the pandemic, it would be worth downloading that resource, because there often are ideas that, you know, are implemented like in Arizona or something that could trigger, oh, maybe we could try that as well.
And I just put my email in the chat for anybody, you know, you can email me with any questions or comments or anything. And yeah, thank you again for letting me talk about the program. And you know, I'm happy to share any other things about home visiting throughout. So thank you.
Wonderful. And please thank, on behalf of this group, please thank the home visitors that you work with. And,
I will.
And I mean, tell them, I think I can speak for everybody to say what an incredible, historically, but also really right now, what an incredible resource you are.
Thank you.
With
They are the glue that hold it all together for sure. Thank you.
Let me take 1 minute to preview how this week is going to connect to next week. And then we will need to wrap up for today. Now, do I need to share my screen? Yes. Here we go. Look how good I'm getting at this. Okay. There's always a little lag time here. Okay, so still with a focus on younger children, although a lot of it, as you see, you know, is applicable across the board. The shift will be from mainly focusing on emotional social development to cognitive development, early learning. So same general framework, what are the goals for children, what are the challenges, and then probably, and we can keep it flexible, but I've got a couple of resources that I want to spend some time on, helping families, and this really connects with what Erin was talking about, think about realistic, playful learning activities, that not creating a little preschool at home, but what are ideas when young children are home during the pandemic? What are some playful learning activities that they can use? Nice examples, both nationally and internationally, of organizations that are trying to put together easy access to activities that are interesting, realistic, developmentally appropriate for children, without taking up families' time, 100%. A little bit digital media, as I mentioned, what are, this is a tool. Also, I think this will be, although it affects all aspects of development, some discussion, and I'll look to some of you for help, how during the pandemic, the progress of young children with disabilities is being supported. I've got actually a great video from DEC about that. And then I think we should think about, this goes into older children as well, but as childcare centers, preschools, not only locally, but in other states, in part or completely, are planning to move back into in-person learning. What are some of the transition issues there for children and also for teachers and others? So those are some thoughts about next week. As always, feel free to, you're invited to email me, reach out with ideas, resources, or anything else. Well, thank you again, Erin, and thanks to all of you. Stay warm and stay healthy and eat your heart out, but we have appointments for our shots next week at Du Bois Middle School. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.